Welcome to Live by Heart Today show number 85. This is a show designed to help you navigate change, uncertainty, and the world we found ourselves in. We'll talk a little bit about science. We'll talk a little bit about how our body works, a little bit about intuition, and we talk a lot about transformation.
Live by Heart Today is brought to you by
wearehistorically.com. Conscious Human Apparel.
Raise your vibration and energize your life with specialized Fibonacci tuning forks that deepen meditations and empower self-healing. Get your vibrational sound tools for personal enhancement at energybodytuners.com.
Hello, I'm Dawn Spiegelberg, medical intuitive and coherence coach. This show is in our pilgrimage series, and today's theme is simplicity. With me for today's Heart to Heart is my guest, Dr. Walter, homeopath and founder of Biofocusing. Hi, Walter.
Hi, Dawn. Good to see you.
Thank you. It's so good to have you here. We're discussing the simplicity of the heart, and I think we often make it complex. We make it difficult, unreasonable. And with regard to the simplicity of it, I think when we come from the perspective that it isn't too difficult, it isn't rocket science, it may give us a leg up in understanding what our own heart is experiencing.
I'd say that whereas the mind tends towards complexity because it's a busy facility that we have, the heart's strength is simplicity. And I'd begin by saying that a couple of years ago, one of my biggest mentors died. And we corresponded a bit before he died. I couldn't visit him because we were quite a distance apart. But before he died, we corresponded quite a lot. And it was interesting to note in retrospect, as well as at the time, but even more so in retrospect, how the conversations got more and more simple. Because we would ask each other what really mattered. Now, because he was an outstanding academic, his colleagues wanted to put together a little book, including his papers, including things that he'd done in research, including things about him. Because his death was apparent, evident. Everyone knew it was going to happen eventually. So they put this book together, and one of the possibilities was that I was going to include a poem in this book. That didn't materialize, and he was mentioning that to me, saying, "Did it matter?" And I said, "Of course it doesn't matter. Nothing. What does matter? What really does matter at the end of the day?" And I remember that our concluding remarks was that the heart is simple. It requires little. So I think it's a truth worth looking at. Because at the end of the day, I think that when words fail and deeply emotional things are felt and are hard to articulate, the mind might be baffled, but the heart certainly knows something. So perhaps we could look at that and pursue that. I think it's valuable.
You're right. When I look at experiences I myself have had, and the simple moments, there's such strength, there's such deep connection. I'm reminded of meeting a woman at church. We're at a new church, and I discovered she was 92 years old. And I was speaking with her son-in-law, which is how I met her, because they were sitting together. And she asked one simple question. And I looked at her, and there was an immediate heart connection. And it wasn't the question. It was that she had an open heart, and I had an open heart. And we barely spoke. But she reached out and touched my hand and smiled. and said it was a pleasure to meet you. And I asked her name. She was named after Shirley Temple. How fun is that? And after she said that, she laughed a little bit. Right? It was so simple. She was named after Shirley Temple. And she did learn to tap dance. Just another little fun thing. And it was so wonderful to meet her. And it was a brief encounter, but it was simple and it was meaningful. It was profound.
A question which intrigues me is how does one become aware? How does one know? How does one recognize when there's a sense of heart contact like that? Because I think it happens all the time. And most of the time we aren't paying attention. It can, very odd things can happen at strange moments, which we don't even notice. And yet they are the actual stuff of heart contact.
Yeah.
So a theme which runs through my mind as I think about these things is the theme which balances randomness against purpose. Because it seems to me that if we ask the really penetrating questions about being alive, and we ask, is this random or is there any purpose to it? That if we look at what the heart makes contact with on a daily, even hourly basis, this gives some sort of sense of what could be purpose. Because it's not merely mental, intellectual stuff which we use to work towards, grand purposes, but the simplicity of daily purpose, which is often a matter of affection. It builds affection and adds that kind of substance to our lives, which makes sense at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to mention one of the very basic ways I recognize heart connection is with eye contact. And if you're around children who are pre-verbal, their eyes are always looking, and with intensity and with an observation. And that observation doesn't come with judgment. It doesn't come with any preconceptions. It's sincere and it's really incredible. And when I meet people who don't maintain eye contact, I know immediately where their heart is. They struggle.
Yeah. What is it that gives us a sense of heart contact, even before it becomes connection? If one had to pick on practical examples, what during this day, these past couple of hours, actually took our attention? I want to go back to attention. Attention is so crucial because we think we're in charge of it, but we're not. It's not random either. It's doing something. And again, you can't bypass biology. You can't bypass physiology. This is not something that's happening in any vacuum. This is your genuine, real brain, your neurology working through your senses, through your body, through everything that you are. And it's making contact at every moment with something or other that both creates and focuses attention. And to me, it's an interesting mystery about why my attention, or the attention that is me, should alight on something very simple at any given time, which gives me something in return. I think of ecology, creatures, plants, entire hosts of things making contact with each other across the way, creating living patterns. And we tend to think of humans as individuals, as solitary individuals. And to me, this makes less and less sense because your attention is that which is actually making contact all the time with something else. So what is that something else? And how does it affect you? There are lots of poems in each moment. You could notice this, you could notice the next thing. Is it you? Could you really talk about you paying attention, or is it something that is within you, something that is greater than you, something that is more like a choir than one individual solo voice, making contact with the context that's around you? It's a big question, but that's the way it strikes me.
It is a big question because people are just beginning to understand that that little phrase that says, "Where your attention goes, energy flows." And I add to it, love grows.
And I'm actually thinking of it coming the other way as well, because there is that which comes to you, and often that's a matter of grace. Something comes to you, you didn't even ask for it. I've become more and more aware of that lately, especially of families and genealogies, which have blessed me with much, although I wasn't even thought of at the time. And in addition to that, there's also that which is a natural context around me, giving me the air that I breathe, which is also a matter of grace. So there's a huge communication going on over here somewhere, which boils down to simplicity, even though there's so much going on. And instead of talking about it and analyzing it, recognizing it and realizing at the level of heart, I think brings about a sense of living which is exciting, because there is something new in every moment, isn't there?
I'm reminded of a verse in the Bible. That's because that's the religion I have a frame of reference for, and not very many others. But in particular, it says people are designed to be grateful, to God, to the heart of the cosmos. And I think that's what you're describing, to recognize things are coming to you without you necessarily deserving it or taking specific action in order for that to happen. And you're right, that is grace. It's receiving something that
it makes the distinction.
Wasn't expected, something that you don't deserve.
Yes, it makes a distinction between the ego and the body. So very interesting, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because the ego is a construct, the body is not in the same category of being a construct at all. We can't help ourselves being bodies, but we are egos on purpose. And there's an interesting bridge to cross between these two, because the body is heart, whereas the ego is often pretended purpose rather than even real purpose.
Yeah, I actually wonder a lot about the ego part of us, because it develops, and it makes me wonder, where does it come from? How does it develop? I first began asking this question because my youngest was 2 and still wearing diapers, and he announced, "I have another spirit growing inside me." And I said, "Oh, really? Right. What is that about?" And he said, "It's called ego." And I was in shock, but he was telling the truth, that he could feel his own ego developing.
Mm.
And, where does that come from? How does that happen? I don't know.
I think that there's an answer available to that, that the ego is a narrative, which it's a narrative which develops, because that's what brains do. They throw out narratives at probably hundreds a minute, and then you aggregate it out to something that you settle with and believe in, and that then becomes your working ego, which is, of course, you can change it anytime you want, but most people tend to follow the path that it seems to pursue in its own right. That's not the heart. I think the heart is a good corrective, because when you're shocked by something, when you're surprised by something, when you have to grieve, when you have to rejoice because you can't help it, that's more like the heart talking.
Yeah.
And it will address the ego, and often reminded of humility. that we are actually breathing dust at the end of the day.
And so would you posit that we could direct our ego? That it's not just a, wild horse, but that we could actually focus it?
Well, to continue with your metaphor, I think it's a dragon that's totally tameable, in the sense that you can saddle it, you can climb on it, and you can ride it, but you have to make friends with it. Your brain, which is wild, has produced it, and therefore you need to respect and honor it. It's your story, and don't get me going on that because I'll keep going for a long time. But your story is always changeable. You're the director, you're not the victim. That's a whole theme on its own. But that's physiologically, that's Genesis is physiological. Its ending is creative. You create your story as you go along, willy-nilly, to a greater or lesser extent. And I think that's one of mankind's biggest gifts to the cosmos, to be able to honor, recognize, create, direct, change stories. I think someone who's got his finger right on the button with this is Rich Martini, who is a movie director. And he has a lot to say in this kind of connection. And observing some of his work, I've learned a lot.
I haven't heard of him. Do you know of any of the particular movies he's directed?
I can't reel them offhand, no. But if he's freely
available, we'll look it up.
He does something called hacking the afterlife, is it, or hacking the flip side? On YouTube.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I think the best directors boil things down to their simplest.
They're capable of catching an awfully simple thing and amplifying it and taking note of it, and it speaks volumes to whatever story they're directing. Yeah.
Yes.
As simple as a glass falling off a table, or something that zooms to a particular detail in the distance. Mm-hmm. Even hovering on a particular musical note while someone's voice stops or begins. Their gift is being able to slow the moment down and noticing very small details. That's part of what they do. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
And our brains are capable of doing the same, but we tend to stick to 60 seconds a minute.
We do, and there are moments in time in our lives when our brain does slow down. I recall being in a car accident, and the whole situation just seemed to be in slow motion.
Yeah. I think the same can happen in cooking.
In cooking?
Yes, in cooking, where things have got to come.
Accidents happen in cooking?
No, not accidents at all. When things have got to come together at the last moment, and they either do or they don't. And in that last moment, the concentration and the intensity, literally boiling down to the right taste at the right moment, is is a bit of an adventure.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that's a skill that can be developed. So I'm noticing my husband is a great cook. His mother's a great cook, and there isn't complexity in it. It really can be a simple process, and when they're accentuating certain flavors, it doesn't have to be complex. They're accentuating particular flavors.
Well, food's a case in point. Often the best is entirely simple. Yeah. Bring out what's in front of you, and that's it.
And so cooking is one expression of the heart.
Yes, it is.
I know that food tends to taste better when you're cooking it from a place of contentment, from a place of love and appreciation. And if you're mad about something, the food tastes terrible.
That's strange, isn't it? Because it's so easy to pick up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is strange.
So our heart contact, our heart touch can infuse food.
It will.
It
It does.
can.
Yeah, it's simplicity at one of its most noted.
Yeah, when I think about the U.S., it would seem that the one time of year when people's hearts are open and they're longing, most people would think, it's Valentine's Day. But I think Valentine's Day is a very difficult holiday. I think over Christmas, people's hearts are open in a very different way than at other times of year.
I wonder why, because every day is special, and it's always struck me as being rather odd that when the hype is there, we follow it, but we do, and we sense the absences more, and we sense the losses more. It's an amplification. So I'm actually going the other way, saying that in the everyday activities and in the everyday noticing, that what the heart picks up as simplicity there is actually the creative, constructive building thing. So when the time of year comes, when it's Valentine's or when it's Christmas or particular anniversaries, and the entire world is hyped into the matter of looking for something, and sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not there.
That's true.
But the everyday thing is creative. The everyday thing builds. I mean, I've got no hesitation in saying that. That the latest thing I've been seeing a lot of is that don't not have your first coffee of the day, otherwise you lose 80% of your joy. So the first coffee, the first breath of fresh air outside. I've been inside a lot lately, and going outside, the simplicity of that strikes me more and more. I go out into the cold air, I breathe deeply, and I just enjoy it before I rush back inside. Because that's real. It touches one, and I think that particular word is a useful word. What touches you on a daily basis at the level of the heart, and when you start articulating that, no matter how simple it is, you actually get a grasp that something is there building you all the time.
Thank you for that beautiful statement. We're going to talk more about what touches you when we come back from a short break.
Let's give a shout out to our sponsors. Thank you, We Are Historically, for making this show possible. Shop online at wearehistorically.com.
Hello, I'm Dawn Spiegelberg, a heart coherence coach. How do you feel supported in your life when the rest of the world is anything but supportive to you? It comes from inside. It comes from the foundations that you create day in and day out. The most important thing in understanding how to maintain happiness is the time, because it's the time that you put into maintaining your individual happiness that doesn't just happen overnight. It takes an investment. Live an amazing life and let me help you live that way. Right?
Raise your vibration and energize your life with specialized Fibonacci tuning forks to deepen meditations and empower self-healing. Get your vibrational sound tools for personal enhancement at energybodytuners.com.
Welcome back to the Live by Heart Today show. This is show number 85, and I'm really excited to have Dr. Walter here talking with us about what touches us on a regular basis. And I realize in the comment about the discussion about holidays and how people's hearts can be a little more open during certain times of year than others, I think those who feel that their heart's not open during that time aren't getting the practice in. And when you talk about stepping outside and just taking a breath of fresh air in, noticing on a regular basis, day in and day out, those things that grab your attention, That's practicing the simplicity of the heart, recognizing more frequently than not the state of your heart. How would some of our um, audience practice that on a regular basis? In one of our prior shows, we talked about states of relaxation being vital. And how would one go deeper and begin recognizing their heart touching?
I think the practice of noticing comes back here.
Yeah.
Slowing down, relaxing, and then noticing what's happening in a given moment, and then going beyond that, noticing what touches you. And I think let's not overanalyze what that means, but let's just simply, again, stick with the simplicity of what touches me now. And if that's too close, what has touched me in the past hour? And there will be things. There will be things which you may not, which seem to have passed you by. But the moment that you start reflecting on them, then they haven't passed you by. And so taking note of what's touched you in the past hour, taking note of what touches you in the moment, teaches you to notice what speaks to you, what communicates with you more and more. And I think that's helpful in terms of creating, constructing a story that is not the taken for granted story of yourself. I think it's much easier than one thinks to change your energy.
Mm-hmm.
The energy that you experience as your given self often feels to be more of a platform, a cage, a thing than a process. And once you get used to the idea that it's a process, and it's a process that's happening momentarily, and it's a process that always adds value because it touches you somewhere, invites a response, and the more responsive you are, the more responsive you can learn to be. And for me, that's a key issue: becoming responsive to what's happening in a given moment. I don't think we think about living that way too much. When we are dealing with professional issues, and we have to respond in a given moment to a professional need because we're trained to do that in whatever way. That then becomes an habitual professional response, which is fair enough. But just as a human being, a conscious, not random, purposeful human being, to ask what is the purpose here? What's the purpose now? What is being communicated to me? How could I communicate back? It sounds complex, but I don't mean it to be complex. If you have a wet leaf in front of you, and you reach out and touch that wet leaf, this could seem a completely mundane thing to do. But at the same time, if this is what touches you at a heart level, this is meaningful. You don't think about being meaningful when you just reach out and touch your pet. You don't think about being meaningful when you go past your partner and touch them lightly on the shoulder, just because you feel impelled to do that. You don't set out to do some sort of a cosmic purpose when you add just one more pinch of salt into the food. But all these small simplicities add up into what you are constructing either more consciously or less consciously on a daily and hourly basis. And noticing and paying attention to these develops your attention more and more, such that at the end of the day, your attention becomes larger, more articulate, more something, more able probably to create your story rather than just go along with whatever.
And you're describing something that doesn't require words. It doesn't require language at all. And
no, it doesn't. It requires attention. And it requires pre-verbal attention or non-verbal attention, if you want. I'm not sure what is the correct way of putting that. I would probably say non-verbal attention. Although there is the idea of paraverbal intention, that you could put words to it, but you choose not to, which is an extra layer of consciousness, of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And given that we're bombarded with words and concepts constantly, the news is all words, and television, people talking on the phone. Everything is words based.
I'm often struck by the amount of words that people can put out. If you watch any TV show, and the verbalness thereof, it's actually quite baffling.
I think people come to rely on it. Without words, they're not comfortable.
It's more noise than attention. 90%
Yeah.
noise, 90% noise, 10% attention, but it works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was reading an article today about the quickest languages, and apparently Japanese is first. So many syllables per second, and it listed 6 or 7 of them. English was about number 5, and German was about number 8. I suppose they articulate language more carefully. But the rapidity of language and the way it just fills up space, and more often than not so meaningfully. What people are just driven to, you must have an opinion on this or that. You have to be able to express yourself. Articulation is good. Well, there's nothing wrong with vocabulary. I'm for vocabulary. But at the same time, filling up space with words rather than creative purpose defeats the purpose.
I had a conversation with my older brother just recently, and he was talking about words and being offended. And he asked me the question, if he were to be offended by something that I said and he were to leave and not tell me that he was offended, his question was really very basic. He said, whose responsibility is that? Who is that on? And he's really struggling to understand relationships. And I don't know that he's paying much attention to heart connection, heart touch, although it would seem that he wants it. I think he's looking for it in words, but it doesn't come from words.
I think it ought to be easy, but I'm not sure that it is, for people to acknowledge heart touches. I'm a bit baffled by that. I don't know why people find it difficult to acknowledge. I don't know why it seems to be difficult for folks sometimes to have open hearts. We seem so prone to adopt roles, to fulfill expectations, to go in the opposite direction of the simplicity of heart moments. I'm a bit baffled by that. I find it appealing and easy, but I appreciate that that's not true for everybody at all.
Mm-hmm. I think it has to do with identity, which brings us back to a sense of ego and vocabulary and words, needing words, wanting to hear, relying on words.
I think that's very helpful. Identity, yeah. And what gives you identity on a daily and hourly basis? Because people need signals of some kind, and then the signals are verbal. The signals are verbal rather than simple.
Yes.
You want to hear the speak that makes you feel who you are. You want to experience the jazzy context or the professional context or whatever it is that makes you feel to be who you are, and it's not so much in the simplicities of any given moment.
Mm-hmm. And when an identity feels threatened, that's very uncomfortable. There's that discomfort. There's the inability to shift into heart space. That's where people get offended.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that reminding yourself that you're an animal can be helpful in terms of returning yourself to heart space.
Mhm.
because as humans we complicate things with language.
Yes.
As animals we don't. You're hungry, you're alone, you want your mate, whatever, or you're taking care of your offspring, but the simplicity is there and you're doing it.
And that wraps up our show about simplicity and the simplicity of the heart. Thank you, Dr. Walter. Thank you for being here with me today. And thank you to everyone who's watching. Please let us know. We want to hear from you if you're watching. Tell us what's on your heart by leaving us a comment below. For more information about how you can live by heart, please go to our site, livebyhearttoday.com. Like and follow this page and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of our programs. We're here on Thursdays at 4:44 Pacific time. From our heart to yours, we're creating a better tomorrow because we live by heart today.
And that concludes this portion of Live by Heart Today.
And thank you to our sponsors for making the show possible. Hooray! Thank you, We Are Storkly, for your conscious human apparel. Shop online at wearehistorically.com.
Level up your life and raise your vibration with specialized Fibonacci tuning forks. Get your vibrational sound tools for your personal enhancement at energybodytuners.com.
Thank you for joining us. Have a happy always. View more episodes on our website.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. You're required to take the communication more seriously.